you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Estimate Taxation for March 2009. Call on the clerk for the routine applications.
Yes, I move the following routine applications. ED 9 for the Board of Education, an appropriation for $35,337. PS 1 for parking services, release of conditions of $50,000. PW 6 for the Department of Public Works, release of conditions for $19,000. And HD 5 for the Health Department, approval to use $44,000.
There's been a motion by Ms. Tarkington, second by Mr. Mason. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 12-0-0. There's the assessor's report now comes before us. The assessor, Ted Gortney. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. You have my report, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Before we begin, I got an email tonight as I was walking in from Bob Felsen, who I guess was still under the belief that we were taking up the online assessment information. Just so it's perfectly clear, as you can see on your agenda, I know all of you know this, but just to make sure it's clear, we will be taking this matter up in April. I think the special project team still has some work to do with the assessor, and we anticipate having a vote as to that item at our April meeting. Okay. So with that, Ms. Tarkington, you had your hand up.
Yes, I just had a question. Said assessment corrections of four-wheel drive and turbo diesel vehicles. Could you just explain that? Was there an issue with those? Or?
The initial values that we received on those vehicles had them priced much lower than what they were selling for, so it needed to have corrections made to them to put the proper pricing on them.
So it's not like a blue book, it's just, or what?
They didn't use the correct Blue Book value, they being the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Department of Motor Vehicles, not the OPM, Office of Policy and Management?
It's the Department of Motor Vehicles that gives us a draft grand list of motor vehicles, and they attempt to match up Blue Book values to the various vehicles. However, there's a large percentage that they cannot find. Those are called unpriced, and those we price ourselves. And in this particular category, they use the wrong pricing on these type of vehicles.
Thank you. And then it says here that the under your point number 2, revaluation progress, that the revaluation company attends open houses. Are the open houses, are these the ones that the brokers have, and does the reval company have access to those? I mean, or what exactly does this mean?
The reval company has a membership in the Greenwich Realty Board.
Thank you.
Mr. Stone and then Mr. Stone and then Mr. Simon.
Ted, I've got two questions that are sort of related. The first concerning, let's call it the continuing decline of residential sales. Do you have a sense of the experience of other communities' sales?
It's very similar in other communities as to Greenwich. The sales, generally speaking, are going down. That is true at least in Fairfield County. There are some areas in the country where the sales are starting to pick up, but our sales kind of tapered off after many other regions, and now they've kind of gone down a lot.
Okay. Now, in the past, you've referred to the need for legislation in the event that there's going to be a deferral of revaluation before a certain number of years have passed. And in view of this slowdown that we, and from what you're saying now, other communities are experiencing, do you hear about any movement within Hartford to create such legislation?
There is legislation pending for several pieces of legislation. Typically, they're for a 2 or 3 year deferral of the revaluation. In Greenwich's case, we were going on a 4-year cycle, whereas the requirement is a 5-year cycle, so that we can delay from 2009 to 2010 without requiring any legislative enactment.
But from what we're seeing a decline. We're not certain that we've hit bottom yet, much less begun a rebound to provide the kind of statistical data that you think you'll need for a good reval. We may wind up facing the same situation next year, and it could be that we'll be looking for some help on the legislative side.
Well, there is some legislation pending.
Thank you.
Mr. Simon?
I have two questions also. What are the results of the Board of Assessment Appeals activities?
They completed their hearings, and we got really the final ones late this afternoon. It would appear that the total amount of reductions is roughly $35 million.
All right, and we budgeted $20 million,
Yes.
so the $15 million reduction is about $120,000 negative for us at 8 mills.
Yes.
I just didn't do that in my head. I already calculated this. I just didn't want you to think that, using my own guess. And the second is now in the tax relief for the elderly. So we're getting a lot of applications. What happens, but we're only getting applications from people who file in the odd year filers. We have even year filers, don't we?
Yes.
So what happens now when we go through this, and there could be even year filers who will not get a credit this year?
If they got a credit last year, they will get a credit this year.
But think about this. You're going to give us a list of everybody, and we're going to set a target.
Yes.
And there could be even year filers above that target.
Yes.
They're not going to get a credit.
That's true.
And their income may have fallen, and they may not be aware of that issue.
There is a statement on the application that this is subject to the funding of the program.
And did we send that to the even year filers, that statement?
No.
Right. So I'm just pointing out to you what's almost certain to happen is that because we raised the credits, there are people that got the credit last year that were even year filers. They're going to all of a sudden, who didn't think they have to apply it, even though their income may have decreased, that aren't going to get the credit this year. And now you're going to have, you, including the 12 of us, a small mess on our hands. So, you might want to, and I don't know how many even year filers, but you might want to send out a notice that if even year filers' their incomes have decreased significantly or at all, they may want to resubmit because they're going to get cut off.
Okay. Potentially, yes. At this point, the number of applicants has not been as great as one would have anticipated. So we're, at this point, unwilling or unable to really determine what the likelihood is. I'd like to be able to predict it more accurately.
Right, but by the time you're able to predict it, it will be too late.
It's going to be a function of what the BET determines as the amount, and a function of the number of applicants and the income levels of the applicants. And we'll be able to do running totals on that for a time. I think it would not make sense to have over 200 people come in and make a new application when it's at this point, I think, unlikely that it would be necessary.
Well, the only ones that would be affected are those people who are in even years whose income decreased. And it decreased significantly so that they would then get a credit that they otherwise, because we may set the limit at 570, we've increased the credits by 15% or 20%. There's any number of people that are not going to get a credit this year that did get it last year and will have had no opportunity and not even be aware that they're not going to get the credit. And this is going to be a bad public relations effort.
Most of the new applicants are going to be those that are in the higher income categories. You're really thinking in terms of that there'd be a swelling in the lower income categories, and that is a possibility. But certainly by raising the income limits, we're going to be having more in the higher income levels.
I'm more worried about someone who made $34, $35, $36, $37, $38, and $39,000 last year. That's an even year filer that's not going to get a credit this year. That's what I'm worried about.
What I would be willing to do is work some mathematics with you when we have our monthly meeting and kind of give you some scenarios about what the likelihood is. And we may come to a conclusion that certain categories, such as those earning from $35,000 to $39,000, maybe should be contacted. But I'd like to work from facts on that.
Okay?
Ms. Tarkington?
I wanted to follow on Mr. Simon's question. It said to date, there's only 174 applications have been received. How does that number compare with last year, the year before? Just a raw number, not necessarily the income. Do you have any feel for that?
It's about the same.
About the same. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to accept the assessor's report?
So moved.
Moved by Ms.
Second.
Tarkington, second by Mr. Simon. Discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? 12-0-0. You should have received either in your packet or at your
This is my favorite piece of my pack.
desk 4 reports: the Audit Committee, Nathaniel Witherell Town Building Committee, Havemeyer Downtown Project Report, Human Resources Committee Report. Are there any questions on any of those reports? Hearing none, we'll move on to the Comptroller's report. Our Comptroller, Peter Mynarski. Good evening.
Good evening. I have 2 updates to the Comptroller's report. The first one is on page 1, second paragraph under the Retirement Board. The contract for the Wellington Trust Company has moved out of the Law Department, and the Retirement Administrator will be sending an email electronically to Mr. Norton and Mr. Finger, and they will have to schedule a meeting of the Investment Advisory Committee to review the contract and then make a recommendation to the full BET. The second is on page 3. I'm sorry, page 2, third paragraph. We completed the process for RFP search for insurance broker. There was 4 finalists. We interviewed 2 on the 10th and 2 on the 13th, Friday. The panelist, the risk manager, special projects coordinator, myself, met with the purchasing department. We ranked them. The incumbent came out number 1. However, it was the top quoter for $100,000. We negotiated with Franklin Company, and we bought them down $32,000. So for the next 4 years, they've decided we can lock them in for $68,000 a year. So we've tentatively, the contract has to be drawn up, selected Franklin Company. And if anybody else has any questions on any other part of the Comptroller's report, I'll answer them.
Mr. Norton and then Ms. Barton.
Yes, Mr. Banowski, question in regard to the issue that's raised in the last couple of days, but the Nathaniel Witherell seeking to be able to provide insurance either for itself or for the town. Would you address that issue, please?
This is the management comment regarding moving from the gap method to the blended method.
No, I'm talking about the providing insurance coverage. You've selected, or you're recommending Franklin Company to provide brokerage services to the town of Greenwich for its insurance products. The question I have relates to requests made by Nathaniel Witherell to be able to provide independently of that.
Okay, sorry.
Insurance both for itself and as well for the town if possible.
I don't want to say former, I don't know if the executive director is still employed at Nathaniel Witherell, had made a desire, he wanted to go out and to try to procure insurance for the Nathaniel Witherell on his own. And the issue went away because he's no longer going to be here to solicit insurance quotes. The insurance broker, Frankel, will go out and solicit the insurance quotes for Nathaniel Witherall. The broker of record, traditionally, a town should only have one insurance broker of record. The insurance companies will not honor more than one broker soliciting quotes from a municipality, in my past experiences. So that issue has gone away as far as I can see. We will solicit input from the Ray Augustine, the finance director up at the Nathaniel Witherall, and share with him some of the results. And if he's got any additional input, we can coordinate with the insurance broker and see if we can come up with a better quote. But the insurance broker will be the only one seeking quotes for the insurances.
Mr. Manosky, is it not true that a meeting has been scheduled with Mr. Augustine, with the Director of Purchasing and the Risk Manager to address this issue?
I don't know. I saw the email that it was tentatively scheduled for 10 o'clock Wednesday or Thursday, and the risk manager had a conflict, and I'll defer to John Crary because I'm not sure if the meeting did get rescheduled. It's 11 o'clock next Wednesday. To 25th, yeah.
Ms. Spartan.
Peter, I have two questions. One of them also relates to Nathaniel Witherall and is not addressed in your report. We recently received the operating plan from the Nathaniel Witherall, and we have a consultant on board to evaluate that plan for us?
No, I've developed the scope, and I've sent the scope and the business plan to Bloom Shapiro, McGladrey and Pullen, and a third company that I can't recall right now, which was done a few weeks prior. Right now, Bloom Shapiro has turned this down, citing a conflict of interest, and McGladrey and Company, McGladrey and Pullen, are very anxious to do it. They claim they have consultants in New York City and Boston that specialize in this area. I would like to get at least a third company to look at the long-range business plan. So I'm still, I have one more quote to go.
And can you report to us next month on where that stands, how long it
Definitely,
will take,
yes,
et cetera?
yes, yes.
Thank you. My other question relates to the retirement plan's proposed investment in the Wellington Trust Company. Will you require a law department, law committee review of that contract?
I think so, yes.
We're a little pressed for time, so if you could let us know what the proposed schedule for that is, we will, of course, schedule a meeting.
It will have to be between now and next month's BET meeting, so
We have plenty of time between now and
so
then.
we will also include you in the email distribution,
Thank you.
and Mr. Campbell.
Other questions for the comptroller? Mr. Simon.
Does Franklin Company get paid by any of the insurance companies?
They are not supposed to be, and when they issue an invoice for their $68,000, they have that language right on the invoice, that they do not get commissions.
All right. And then I just want to make sure, who's driving? Do we feel we have from Nathaniel Witherall, this is really a question to the chairman, a business plan that we're going to go through and vet for Nathaniel Witherall? Are we still waiting for more documentation? It's not clear exactly what we have in hand. It wasn't clear to me.
My understanding is we have in hand exactly what they were going to produce for a business plan that we would then have reviewed by an outside agency to go through the numbers and to determine whether or not that new business plan supported Project Renew. And as this body discussed previously, having that plan then vetted through the RTM if in fact it was materially different from the previous business plan before Project Renew was approved for construction and the monies appropriated. So I think as of this point, we have what they believe to be their modified business plan, and if in fact the consultants need additional information, we certainly will then request that additional information.
Who was the company in Minnesota? Was that hired by Nathaniel Witherall, or was that hired by us to review the business plan last time?
It was hired by finance. It's Health Dimensions Group.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they were knowledgeable also. If you wanted to consider, if you're looking for just another person to send an RFP to.
I could do that.
I think we're going to also be looking for a timeline. Obviously, this is an ongoing discussion with Nathaniel Witherall, and so one of the things that we need to orchestrate is not only the selection of the consultant, but then what's the timing of this, because eventually this is going to need to go before the RTM, and many of the questions that we have, I'm assuming, will be questions that the RTM has regarding this modified business plan. So that's another major item that we'll be discussing at our April meeting. Mr. Stone.
Peter, referring before to Wellington Trust, they're a replacement manager for the retirement board's?
No, they're below the line in the private equity, the alternative investments, on the bottom of the flash report.
Okay, and what's their sector?
They, this is, the terminology is opportunistic credit markets, and the particular product they're pushing is bundled home equity, not home mortgages, but home equity mortgages. Not familiar with the total package that they offer.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the comptroller? Is there a motion to accept the report? Moved by Ms. Tarkington, second by Mr. Mason. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? 12-0-0. Treasurer's report. Are there any questions for the comptroller?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Finger.
Peter, I noticed that it appears as though we've closed out all the STIF accounts. Is that correct?
The answer is no, but we are in the process. They've been removed from the treasurer's report, and I don't know if they've officially been closed out. We're going to leave one open. We have to leave one open because it's used as a pass-through by the state of Connecticut when we get state grants. So they will wire them, and the very next day they're wired out of the STIF account. So we need to have one open.
Are we handicapped in any way if at some point in the future we decide we want to get back into these STIF accounts, having closed out many of the ones that we previously had?
No, they're easy to open.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Norton.
Yes, on the Treasury report, Peter, the general fund, the item for Webster Bank, is that a money market account? And I'm going to
Yep.
refer to your Treasurer's report, I'm sorry, to your Controller's report on page 4, in which you have the current rates for various financial institutions as of March 11th. And is this a money market account at Webster Bank, the $10 million that was opened this month?
Yes, that is, and you pointed out prior to the meeting, the percentage, the return needs a couple of additional zeros in there.
Okay.
It was a 10 million. It was opened in the middle of the month, and
It looks like a 1.32% yield.
Yeah, but the
yes. So for the rest of the BET and the general fund, the bottom line, Webster Bank all the way to the right where it says percent 0.221. That's probably a formula error. It needs a lower number, at least one more zero.
2 more zeros.
You don't think that? I think that's correct.
No, it's not.
Because if you take that number and multiply it by 12, you get like 2.4%.
No, it's 1.3%.
But the money, what if the money was only there half the month?
Exactly.
That's
You
why you
can't
don't know.
multiply it by 12.
But
Ms. Barton.
Is the one-page document that's headed Town of Greenwich cash flow forecast part of the treasurer's report?
That was a BET requirement from 3 or 4 months ago. The BET wished to see the cash flow attached to the treasury report. Yes.
What do you think it tells us about the levels of the principal revenues that we're interested in for the close of this year And the estimates for next year, building permits, conveyance taxes, and interest. It looks to me as though the estimates for the end of this year are a bit lower than the estimates for our budget next year, is my principal concern.
Hopefully the three large categories turn around: the building permits, the conveyance tax, and the interest income. The BET sets the mill rate in May, and one of the chores is to look at the revenues. And these three definitely will have to be looked at. We will have 2 more months to look at it. So if in fact that they are trending too low, there will have to be a decision as to what we're going to put into the budget as far as the revenue assumptions.
Is there a way of characterizing these assumptions as either optimistic, pessimistic, or middle of the line? Do you have a view on that?
Which one, the ones here or the one in the budget?
The ones in this forecast. If you
They're-
want to take them one at a time, that's fine.
They're an attempt to neither be optimistic or pessimistic,
Do you think they're
to be
realistic?
accurate. But like I said before, they can turn around if in fact we start selling houses, and if in fact the building permits pick up, then they'll be a little low. I don't believe they can go much lower.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there an approval to, or a motion to approve the treasurer's report? Moved by Mr. Norton. I think that was Mr. Finger that I heard. If I didn't, he's getting credit for it anyway. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? 12-0-0. Approval of BET meeting minutes. Let's take them separately. February 11th. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Norton, second by Mr. Simon. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? 12-0-0. And approval of the minutes for February 17th, 2009. Is there a motion? Moved by Mr. Simon. Second by Mr. Raymer. Finger. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Crumick abstains. 11-0-1. Very well. Officers report. Mr. Stone.
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Tarkington? I'm going to spend all of my time briefly talking about the rest of today's week, or this week. We have our public hearing tomorrow at 7 p.m. We have our then decision meeting at 7 p.m. again Thursday. The budget will then be processed and sent to the RTM. I will say that the RTM was responsive to our request to come pick up the budgets. I think about half were picked up personally, saving us about $5 a bundle. So some decent savings there, and certainly we appreciate the work of the RTM in terms of picking them up. The ones that were not picked up were mailed out as indicated by 3 o'clock or so on Friday, so hopefully all of those reach their destinations either on Saturday or at the latest today, so that all RTM members have a chance to look at their budgets before tomorrow night. You certainly know of the same issues that I know of. I've tried to communicate all of the emails that have been sent to me directly through finance and to all of you. And so you certainly should be aware of the issues that are on people's minds. We will have a time limit of 3 minutes per speaker, depending on how many speakers are here, or at least initially sign in. That restriction will either be strictly adhered to or not, depending on the volume of people tomorrow. I would then ask that if you do have your budget submissions, and I've asked the budget director to send out the housekeeping ones, but it would be helpful if you can get the changes to the budget to us to finance tomorrow, barring those issues that you have a change of opinion on based on the public hearing, to finance tomorrow, so that we can start thinking about it. And I think it's important that other BET members are aware of what your thoughts are if in fact you wish to change the budget prior to the public hearing, because I think puts it in greater context for the other members of the BET. and I think that's helpful. Even if you can't get the form done, even to shoot an email to Elaine, that would be helpful, so she'll get it right out. I want to thank everyone who did attend the RTM meetings. We did receive positive feedback from almost every district, and I think it was good that we got an understanding as to what their concerns are. District 11 did meet. I sent that email out to everyone today, and they had some viewpoints as well that they have now shared with all of us before our vote, and I think that's important. And with that, we are looking forward to an orderly public hearing and then an orderly decision meeting on Thursday. Is there any old business that comes before us? Mr. Simon?
So what is the process by which we're going to see resolutions? The law committee is going to meet later this week, and before Thursday, we're going to see another draft set of resolutions. These are like questions. These are questions. I just want to make sure I know when I'm going to see resolutions that we're going to vote on. Or are we going to vote on, it's not, we passed a set of resolutions, essentially, at the Budget Committee?
Correct.
The Budget Committee did not act on the resolutions and asked the Law Committee to take them up with comments that were made as late as last week. We circulated a draft right after the Budget Committee meeting, and then followed up last night with another draft that had comments from our Law Department. With one exception, I have had no comments directly from members of the BET. Indirectly, I have a fair number of conflicting comments. So I guess it's going to be up to Jim Campbell and me in the next couple of days to come up with a set of proposed resolutions, and then we'll turn them over to you to do whatever you like.
But to put into some context, we're not talking about the revisions that were sent out this week dealt with one area of the resolutions. We're not talking about wholesale
That-
changes.
We're
I
talking
just want to
about
make
very,
sure it's,
very small areas.
that's right.
The
So,
one area that's still subject to debate is the area that we've never revised in the past. So the changes are coming before us for the first time this year. And they are in the series of resolutions that we've traditionally called additional provisions, and they deal predominantly with issues relating to the table of organization and issues that arise out of that. It is that set of 2 or 3 pages of resolutions that remain unapproved by anyone other than their helpless drafter.
So from my point of view, to be able to see the result of the Law Committee work, or what we're going to look at on Thursday by sometime on Wednesday,
Yes,
would be most helpful.
that will happen. We are scheduling a meeting. It will be noticed first thing tomorrow, probably to take place on Wednesday morning.
any other questions on the budget process? Everyone should be aware of this, but obviously I'll just state it again for clarity. If you do not make a motion to change the recommended budget as presented by the Budget Committee, then the budget will simply go forward as presented. So if you wish to change something that was recommended, you have to put in the slip, make the motion, obviously garner a second, and then we will discuss it. Ms. Martin?
Is there going to be discussion permitted in the absence of a motion?
No.
Well, the motion by the Budget Committee for approval of the budget surely merits discussion. Whether anyone makes a contrary motion or not, it would seem to me that we're entitled to be heard and to have a discussion about that motion before we vote on it,
Okay.
unless I'm out of order. If a
I
motion
don't think
is
you're out of order.
required for discussion, then motions can be drafted.
Sure. What I need to avoid on Thursday, however, is if a generalized statement about a particular capital project, that there is no intention to change that capital project from the budget. I think in terms of discuss, I would prefer it to be a motion, in the form of a motion, to properly come before us to then talk about it. But I do agree with you that at the end of the meeting, we vote on the budget as amended. And I think at that time, if you're talking about generalized comments about the budget, then I think that would be in order to talk about it generally at that point.
Thank you.
Any other questions? New business? Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Raymer, second by Mr. Kelly.